Tomb Raider, The Angel of Darkness, adapted from the novelization by J.R. Milward. Based on an original story by Murti Schofield. With J.R. Milward and Adamm Khuevrr. With music by Peter Connolly and Martin Iverson. Episode 4.
Over the years, a number of people have remarked that I possess abnormally sharp senses. For the most part, I scorn such presumptions, although I will acknowledge that my training and daily routines keep me well honed and alert. I'm sure most people would find their vision, hearing, smell, taste, and all the rest increasing if only they concentrated more on the here and now and ignored the twittering of their minds for 5 minutes. Yes, they would, wouldn't they? Someday I would remember to register for a self-exorcism class. As I left Café Metro and hunted for Francine's apartment, I found myself wishing for extra senses to reassure me. My footsteps echoed like bronze hammers on anvils. Every breath of wind felt like the rushing of an oncoming train in my ears. The fear that had Paris in its grip was starting to affect me, and I had only been here a matter of hours. I could not imagine living with this feeling day in, day out. No wonder the streets were empty. Well, this looks like the place. You're early. Francine leaned on the door, taking me in with quick, tense eyes. She wore black, smart and secretarial. What little I could take in of her apartment seemed as far from Café Metro's tastes as possible. She was at a level with my height, but rail thin, contrasting oddly with her rounded cheeks, hinting maybe at some underlying health issue. I couldn't help but compare her with my mental picture of Pierre, but the two were like oil and water. Is that a problem? Not for me, but for you, Sherry. Bouchard is in the old church. There's a mausoleum in the churchyard that leads down to the church basement. It's just... he's not used to casual callers. Be careful. Is this the best way? It's the only way past the doorman. Just watch out for the ledges. They are dangerous. I didn't need her to remind me, but it cost nothing to nod politely. From the way she kept rubbing her fingers together, she was obviously as eager to see me leave as for me not to fall and end up as a corpse outside her window. The drain pipe creaked under my weight as I slid to the ground and dusted off my hands. The graveyard bore similar signs of neglect as the streets. Ancient crisp packets and rusted drink cans lurked in crevices where the wind had blown them. Last year's leaves carpeted the track and between the headstones. I was aware of how easily someone could be hiding behind them, or the mausoleums. Yep, mausoleums, plural. Any one of them could be the entrance to Bouchard's lair, but time was slipping away. I began hunting in earnest, going over every inch of the yard for clues. When I reached the end of the track, my spidey senses started tingling. An angel, carved from white stone, too tacky to be actual marble, towered over me and the surrounding graves. She stood in her own little plot, surrounded by a low fence I easily vaulted on the first attempt. At her feet lay a sarcophagus with its lid almost, but not quite, in its proper position. I crouched, listening until I started to feel pins and needles in my legs. From deep below me, muffled voices bounced off stone and standing water to drift almost unnoticed through the crack in the lid. I slid my fingers under the edge, but it wouldn't budge no matter how hard I tugged. It was inevitable that my thoughts turned to the winged shape casting its shadow over me. As it turned out, the angel wasn't quite as tacky as I'd first thought. I jumped back as, with a last heave, I toppled her over, shattering the solid sarcophagus lid like peanut brittle. Blocks of masonry clattered into the pit, tumbling down steps leading to the catacombs. Hey, don't look at me like that. I raid tombs, not redecorate them. Aware that I was technically in a bad position for anyone to come and investigate the noise, I hastened into the clammy darkness. The occasional fluorescent light bulb threw twisting shadows onto damp walls of mortared stone and Gothic vaulted ceilings. The pitter-patter scurry of vermin made me shudder. Several times I turned a corner only to pull myself back from an icy dip in a stagnant pool. The Seine obviously viewed Christianity's invasion of its floodplain with some contempt, and countermeasures were making slow, watery decay of everything man had created. I was creeping along the cold walls, peering through a door half hidden behind leaking pipes, when a horrific sound whispered down my spine. The last thing I'd heard make a sound like that had been mummified 3,000 years ago. The sibilant noise lapsed into silence, only to erupt again, more painfully, as though some demonic animal was being garroted behind the green Army issue screen that shielded half the room from view. I cursed the curiosity that made me go and peer around it. A powerfully built young man lay on a gurney, turned on his side to face the opposite wall. A stainless steel trolley, laden with bandages and pill bottles, was parked close by, glaring under the rays of medical lamps. The man wore jeans and was naked from the waist up, displaying shoulders a rugby player would be proud of. He was no longer wholly human. I caught my breath. The entire left side of his body had simply melted. I mean, melted. As though he were a wax mannequin that had been placed too near an open gas flame and allowed to twist and deform, dribbling into a bubbling, unrecognisable cascade of silver, glistening pseudo-flesh. My stomach heaved, driven by a fresh wave of sounds from the man, whimpers of unimaginable anguish. His spine flopped uselessly, bucking the torso around so his face fell into lamplight. The face of what was unmistakably just an ordinary guy, bored straight into mine, paralysing me with empathy. A lump formed in my throat, but I couldn't swallow. His cornflower blue eyes pleaded, worse than any wounded animal. My breath turned shallow, fingers clenching around the gun-shaped lump in my pocket. His gaze flicked from it and back again, a burbling cough hacked from his chest, a petition that anything living and wishing to end the hurt would understand.
You can't help him. Who are you?
My eyes cast about professionally, counting at least 5 firearms trained on me from various points around the sick room. No two of their owners were alike in age, size, or clothing, but all staring at me with one part shock, one part total indifference at the prospect of gunning me down where I stood. The melted man had not ceased his pitiable cries, But at least he had sunk back down on the stretcher, squeezing his eyes shut, in a gesture that was somehow more ghastly than when he was actively seeking my help. Lara Croft. I need to speak with Louis Bouchard.
And what would an handsome lady say to yourself, Louis Bouchard?
Business, not pleasure. I didn't come here for a fight. Truce?
Search her.
The shadowy figure stepped into the light to scrutinize me with narrow, beetle black eyes. He topped my 5'9" with more to spare, and had me outweighed by more than 50 kilos, hulking in the manner of a man unused to being told what to do. His cheeks were pale and rather bloated, offset with a smartly bristled haircut. He wore a crisp, mustard-coloured shirt over black slacks and Italian shoes, and rested his hand on the lapels of a tan leather coat that probably cost the same as my motor insurance. His knuckles were the size of walnuts, covered with little white scars, and his eyes were bloodshot. I've seen Kodiak bears that look less dangerous.
Gentlemen, the lady and I are going to talk. See that we're not disturbed.
When you're in the water with sharks, the worst thing you can do is act like prey. Which is why I forced back my shoulders, lifted my chin, and strode through the door with Cleopatran authority. My nose wrinkled. The room beyond was cramped, filled with boxes and bundles that could only have come from military surplus. Old pizza boxes and beer bottles littered an odorous corner, and papers were stacked across a mug-ringed stained coffee table as though a meeting had only just broken up. A dilapidated sofa, its cushions bowed from overuse, occupied a little island amid the impressive inventory. But the man did not sit down. Instead, he turned the door lock and planted his feet firmly, watching me take in his treasure trove. A dragon does not show you his hoard if he thinks you can get out alive afterwards. What happened to your man in the sick room out there, Bouchard?
You got something to say about her, no?
Maybe. It might be linked to what happened to a friend of mine.
I doubt it. Is this why you came down here, eh? To waste my time?
To buy it, actually. You helped a friend of mine a while back. Werner von Croy?
Names don't mean a lot here. Even Oyons. What do they want?
Maps and information on the Louvre.
I remember. 4 weeks ago. Wanted to take a coachload of Japanese tourists to see the Mona Lisa.
Easy, Bouchard. I lost that friend yesterday. Now I'm wanted for his murder.
There was a newscast about the monstrum killing earlier. What would you know about that?
Nothing that would interest you.
You would be surprised how much the monstrum interests me.
My friend? The Louvre?
Yes, the academic. Wanted access to recent archaeological diggings inside the Louvre. I gave him a contact. You want the same?
And more. I need 9mm protection. Backpack, plastic explosives, stun packs. Paris just isn't safe these days.
Who for? You obviously can't take care of yourself.
Do you have what I need?
I know who does. Daniel Ray. Works at the pawnbrokers on the corner of Rue Saint-Marc and Cour de la Seine.
Thin guy? About my height?
That's him. I had to get certain things into his hands. Passports. You could deliver them for me.
Passports?
Check passports. Nothing to dirty your hands with. It's purely a business arrangement.
For which Ren would give me what I need.
For the right price. The passports will prove you come through me. Ren is choosy about his customers. It has saved his life several times.
Was the man in the sick room out there delivering packages for you too?
Oh no. One of my toughest. He is the only survivor of 4 attacks so far.
Attacks? By whom?
An interesting question. We don't know for sure. Yet.
The Paris Monstrum, perhaps.
We're looking into that. You should take care.
An automatic would help. You sold my friend Von Croy some hardware. I need the same.
That was then. We need all the firepower we can get. Ren is your man for that. There. Make sure Ren gets his package. And make sure it is Ren.
Why? Who else could it be?
I'd like to ask poor Arnaud that. But he can't talk anymore. Just make sure Ren gets that package.
An unfriendly wind struck my face as I exited the church. The escape tunnel Bouchard had pointed me down had emerged right in the middle of the nave. The pews had all been cleared aside, and an amateur boxing ring installed in their place. Obviously, there was little call for a house of God in a ghetto ruled by men like Bouchard. A portly trainer surveyed me from the opposite side of the ring, scratching his sagging backside and glaring like an overweight school bully. But the fact I had just come from Bouchard's lair with all my limbs intact was probably all the instruction he needed to leave me in peace. Ren's pawn shop was not hard to find again. A modest sign hung over the door, but the usual shelves of gold watches, jewellery and gaming consoles I would have expected a pawnbroker to display were noticeably absent. Wait. Something isn't right. I paused in the beer-brown hallway, listening. The hallway had offset doors, reminding me of the way medieval castle builders had built stairs at an angle to the main keep to prevent attackers from having a clear run-up with a battering ram. A pattern of pale repairs to the wall plaster suggested Ren's paranoia wasn't entirely unjustified. A man was walking toward me. I had time to notice his suit, an eccentric grey number tailored to perfection, and his face, pulled back almost painfully by a short ponytail and squared-off glasses. The glasses had an odd tint that made his eyes seem to smoulder like dampened coals. Nobody bothers with manners anymore these days. Oh, what is that smell? It came on so strongly, I had to cover my face, my eyes watering. I entered the shop properly, a bomb site of rusty bicycles, old washing machines and collapsing bookcases, and the stink grew to something resembling a sledgehammer. Imagine roadkill, and then imagine crouching next to it a week later, when the storm drains have clogged with 10 times that amount of death and detritus, breathing in corruption and foulness with every breath. I wondered if an old sewer pipe had ruptured nearby. There was something else there too. Something terribly familiar. I dropped the package and sprinted through the twisted, mangled security grille and torn wood that had been the shop's countertop. The back door had literally been wrenched off its hinges, but before I even passed through, I knew what I would see. Ren lay sprawled on his back, having been thrown against the wall. A tumble-dryer propped up his broken neck at a comical angle to make him look right at me, as though he were about to climb to his feet, dust himself off, and demand to know why I was intruding. His belly had been torn open, and bloody sigils had been daubed across the wooden floor. A I felt my legs shaking and forced them to keep me upright. My stomach mounted a rebellion, but I resisted the urge to heave, forcing myself to pick out details methodically and dispassionately. It wasn't easy. The pawnbroker had not been a young man. His rust-coloured shirt, string vest and braces only partly obscured his wound. It was grimly fascinating that so much blood could have come from so skinny a body. His arms and legs lay anyhow, like a stilt-legged puppet forgotten and discarded at the bottom of a cupboard. His expression preserved an aura of bafflement and sudden, delirious terror. The rest of the back room was a textbook lesson in how to survive World War III. Military-grade material was piled everywhere, boxed and labelled with scrupulous precision. A couple of naked light bulbs provided enough illumination to discern a state-of-the-art computer setup, several bookcases arranged into an informal study, and even a steel-reinforced blast door set into the far wall. I spied crates brimming with cans and long-life food rations, alongside kegs plastered with international hazard warnings. A soft beeping emanated from a trapdoor not 10 feet away from me. An escape tunnel? Steady, Lara. You can handle this. Think. My options had just shrunk from few to almost none. My best chance would be to grab whatever supplies I could and get the hell out of there before someone summoned the police. The sight of my second murdered corpse in 12 hours made me clench my fists to control the urge to break something. There was no doubt now. Intentionally or not, I was leaving a trail of bodies across the city. I could rule out my involvement in this killing, but... Focus! You're running out of time! Wary of leaving prints, I tore a scrap of cloth from my jacket lining and used it to scoop up Wren's wallet and tease it open, picking up some folded-up memo notes. My intuition turned up gold. I cautiously tapped in the key code scrawled on one of the notes into the pad beside the armoured doorway, and smiled in triumph as the hydraulic locking mechanism released. Inside was a room no bigger than a broom cupboard, and treasure. SS tranquilizer, C4 explosive, high-voltage stun gun, map of the Louvre and its storm drains, camouflage wear, army boots. Werner obviously hadn't had time to collect it all. It felt like Christmas. I quickly grabbed a backpack hanging from a peg and stuffed it full to bursting, wrestling with the zip until it could take no more. A quiet sort of thrill was building inside of me, one I recognised and had loved for years. I was taking action, preparing, doing. My idea of hell is to be strapped to a chair and forced to sit still for the rest of my life. All I had to do now was find a place where I could hole up undisturbed and prepare myself before dark. I clipped my feet into the boots and hung my own shoes round my neck by their laces, finally feeling like I was making a difference to my hunt. It just goes to prove that you should never, ever take good moments for granted. As I turned to leave, I suddenly registered the cessation of a noise I'd unconsciously been hearing since I entered the shop. An innocuous little buzz, easily mistaken for a fly or a wasp. My eye was drawn to the computer station and a large bundle sitting placidly on the chair. A homemade bomb. Trapdoor! Nothing went boom as I dropped down into the dusty sub-basement, stumbling around boxes till I found a grill I could prise from the wall. A rank breeze would serve as my guide through the darkness. As it turned out, I needn't have worried about needing such assistance, or, for that matter, leaving behind prints. Not when Wren's paranoia was enough to outfit every drug cartel, terrorist group, and apocalypse-crazy wacko for 1,000 miles. The explosion tore through the spillage pipe as I ran, the air growing superheated in the time it takes to say superheated. I pounded towards the circle of light ahead, but then the bow wave caught up and shoved me onwards like an invisible, out-of-control truck careening down the motorway at 80 miles an hour. I could have been screaming the whole way, but it didn't register. I hardly even noticed the explosion's noise, not when the pressure was enough to rupture eardrums and throw me clear across the river onto a barge moored midstream. Then light, heat and sound caught up and had their merry way while I hunkered down and prayed. It felt like hours later when I dared open my eyes, patting out the small fires that were smouldering in my clothes. The knees of my jeans were skinned bare, and I could feel a line of dripping wetness where a nail or some other sharp object had swiped my thigh through the denim. But I'd gotten off lightly, if the smoking column reaching high above the skyline was anything to go by. The appalling stench had disappeared, replaced by the smell of charred wood, ceramic and steel, mingling oddly with the iodine reek of the river. The wailing of sirens rose above the ringing in my ears, but they were still a long way off. I had plenty of time to hop across to shore and get my bearings, find some shelter and plot my heist. If anything was hidden there that could possibly help me locate Werner's killer, it wouldn't stay hidden for long. Despite my bruises, a satisfied smile lifted the corner of my mouth. I climbed to my feet, unsteadily at first, and stood listening to the wharf and the gulls. The pawn shop groaned as burning timbers gave way, air whooshing as it rushed to feed the fire. I was feeling fairly confident, until I glanced across the river and spotted a lone figure watching me. I must have imagined the smug expression on his face as he turned and got back on the bike, roaring away as if he had never been there. Confidence? Who are we kidding? The woman hurried, 10 minutes late for her meeting. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, and she prayed no one would notice. Inexpertly, she dabbed her eyes and stuffed the handkerchief into her pocket. There were red specks on the cloth that had nothing to do with tears. The meeting room was darkened, 113 steps below the constant, ever-shifting background buzz of the city. Down there, deep below the humdrum normality of Parisian life, there was only silence and shadows and secrets. Pale faces turned to look at her as she entered. Faces she despised, feared, respected, and often all three at once. She took the empty chair, trying to ignore the nervous sweat trickling down her back. The man to her left, Grant Muller, licked his lips. His smile was like a camera flash, there one moment, gone the next. The scientist's hands twitched across the flab of his belly. To her right, Joachim Carrel sneered like a cat watching a mongrel dog scratching itself. She had worked with both men for many years, but still did not know what to make of the cool, dispassionate lawyer. Carrel was dressed in his usual sober black, contrasting with his shock of white hair. A silk scarf, the colour of old blood, was draped across his shoulders, and she envied its warmth. She wore only the surgical smock, gloves and boots of her trade. It was cold down there, deep below others' knowledge. The grey-clad gentleman across the table rose to his feet. There was a projection directly behind him, showing street maps and complex strategies in red and green OHP ink. Its soft glow threw his features into shadow. All she could see were his eyes, smouldering like raked-over coals.
You're late.
The threat behind those two little words was more ominous than the creak of thin ice over a bottomless lake. After the meeting had broken up, she waited in the atrium for her confidant, avoiding the gazes of the others as they filed past. Their plane to Prague was already fueled and ready, but like her, it was forced to sit, shrugging off impatience as best it could.
You okay?
Of course. I'm fine.
You don't look it. Drink, it'll help. The master needs you strong for the work ahead.
She managed a haughty scoff, but sipped anyway. It tasted bitterly herbal, probably one of his potent concoctions brewed in the Strahov labs in the floors above her workplace. Together, they watched as their master stalked from the meeting room and departed without giving them a second glance.
Do you really think it will work this time? You saw the way they were glaring at me. He still blames me for the failure last time. Me! As if I was the one who gathered his wretched samples. I can only work with pure specimens, as I'm sure I know perfectly.
Shh!
Boaz paused as the gigantic figure of Gunderson, the master's bodyguard and military advisor, loomed in the doorway, curling his lip at the sight of the two scientists huddled in the corner. Only when he had left the room did she release the breath she had been holding, and the tears threatened once more.
We're not ready to attempt the awakening yet. I need fresh Nephilim DNA if I'm going to test the procedure properly. The original samples have already degraded, which explains the hybrid side effects. If only...
Boaz, you need to calm yourself. These ideas are blasphemous and you know it. Eckhardt knows what he's doing, and we have to trust him. The new order depends on you fulfilling his commands, even when you don't understand them, yes? Now, I know it's been hard on you stuck down there with your inmates, no sunlight or cramped up, yes? But we need you and your knowledge of gene splicing to continue the great work. You have a gift, my dear. A rare gift that will help the Nephilim rise once more. How glorious will it be when that happens, to know that you helped bring about Eden on Earth.
She wiped her eyes, smiling faintly. Muller could be pompous at times, but she trusted his professionalism and conviction in the great work. When her belief weakened, she did not turn to Carrel or Gunderson, or even Eckhardt, the master of them all, but to Muller's gardens and the glimpse of future paradise, a place where she could think and have her faith reaffirmed.
And just think, once we have the last two Obscura paintings, We won't need to worry about hybrids at all. A race of pure Nephilim will walk the earth. We won't need more sampling or subjects, and no more abominations. No offense to your genius, my dear, but I sleep better at night knowing you destroyed the proto in the end. It was the right thing to do. Oh, my dear, are you sure you're all right? You're weeping.
It was only with heroic effort that she stemmed the flow of her tears, brushing her severely cut hair from her eyes. The gesture showed her physical scars, like a line of puckered slashes encircling her face. The accident had happened years ago, before she even knew about Eckhardt and his plans, before she came to work at the Strahov, before she knew the price of failure.
Nothing. Just, I hate to think of my poor little ones all alone. I hope we get the paintings soon, so we can go back and tend them. They must be terribly lonely.
Muller chuckled and helped her to her feet. She was trembling, so he took her to the luncheon room. Something to eat would help, he assured her. She could only smile and nod and pray her secret remained hidden.
In episode 4 of Tomb Raider, The Angel of Darkness, Lara Croft, Francine, Dr. Kristina Boaz, and the narrator were played by J.R. Milward. Louis Bouchard, Pieter Van Eckhardt, and Dr. Grant Muller were played by Adamm Khuevrr. Written and adapted by J.R. Milward. Based on an original story by Murti Schofield, with music by Peter Connolly and Martin Iverson. Additional sound effects courtesy of www.freesfx.co.uk and the BBC. Produced by Stephen Milward. Lara Croft and Tomb Raider are the property of Crystal Dynamics and Square Enix.